So I got asked by someone very close to me to do a video about what it's like to live with more than one mental illness. So let's dive in because I have a few illnesses that I live with and they all can drastically affect my life at any given time. So let's get into it. Um, in 2017, I was diagnosed with bipolar 1, and that was after a failed unaliving attempt, my second unaliving attempt, within a 3-year time period. First time was in 2014, and I did 6 days inpatient, but I was only diagnosed with anxiety and depression. I ended up staying longer at my second inpatient facility so I could get the proper diagnosis, get on some kind of medication regimen, and that's where my bipolar journey really started, was in 2017. I was having self-harming behaviors. I was incredibly suicidal. I really just did not want to be here anymore, and that's what landed me in an inpatient psych facility for the better part of a month, just about a month. So that's where my bipolar journey started, and during the last like 8 years, I have really come a long way with how I handle my bipolar, but that's not the illness that cripples me. It's 100% not the illness that cripples me. About 2 years ago, I was diagnosed as having a borderline personality. So I got diagnosed with BPD, or borderline personality disorder, and that is the one that challenges me the most. But I also have CPTSD, or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and I also suffer from anxiety. And, well, those things are a lot more manageable than the BPD. The BPD is absolutely my worst ever loving nightmare that I have to live with every single day. And so often, bipolar and BPD are like mismatched. They are misdiagnosed. And, it took me a few years after my initial bipolar diagnosis to get the diagnosis of BPD. And with BPD, you could be completely fine 1 minute, an hour, like 1 hour, and then the next hour you're splitting and you start having all these negative thoughts, and if you feel like your world is crashing. Like, it's, when I split, I can go from being somewhat stable to, to thinking why doesn't anybody love me? Why doesn't anyone want to be around me? Why do people keep on walking out on me? Why am I not able to be loved? All these things. So literally, you could go from being fine 1 minute, and then the next minute you are splitting, you are crying, you are questioning everything, and there's really no treatment for it except for therapy. And, I have finally reached a level of stability with the bipolar that I am completely fine with that. I have learned to manage it. I know when I'm going to be going into a manic episode. I can feel it when I'm going into a depressed episode. I know when I am rapid cycling and mixed cycling. I fully am very self-aware of everything that when it comes to living with bipolar disorder. But it's the living with the BPD that really, really is the most challenging. Because it's a personality disorder, and so often BPD gets mistaken for bipolar because it greatly affects moods, and bipolar disorder is a mood disorder. So I just want you guys to kind of wrap your head around the fact that bipolar disorder is moods. BPD is personality, and it often stems from childhood trauma or some kind of childhood, some kind of trauma that you've had Now, for me, what stemmed, like, what's the root cause of my BPD is the fact that, and as much as I love my parents, I really, really do, and I'm forever grateful for everything that they do for me, even now. My BPD stems from not really existing so much in my family, and that's how it's always been. And it is kind of a form of neglect, which is what I've had to go through. See, I grew up in a family where my eldest brother, my only sibling, was regarded as the golden child, basically. And the only ways that I could get attention or anything like that was to act out in extreme ways. And my mental illnesses really started to present themselves at a much younger age than when I was diagnosed. I started showing signs of bipolar and BPD when I was a teenager, like, mid-teens, like 15, 16. And those, looking back on the behaviors that I exhibited back then, the thought processes that I exhibited back then, it was, I really wish that my family would have, taken a step back and really actually noticed that something was going wrong with me, that something was up with me a lot earlier than they did. I was diagnosed at 27 years old. 27 years old with bipolar 1. Even though, 10, 12 years before that, I started showing signs and symptoms of it. But I was often pushed to the wayside. I was often just, looked at as being attention-seeking instead of actually getting the help and the care that I needed. And instead of getting the help that I really deserved back then. I feel like my life would have been completely different had I gotten on medication earlier that was not just treating, depression. And, I wish I had been put into a more rigorous therapy program back then to help me better combat and actually have a better understanding and more time to get the mental illness under control. Because I was not diagnosed right away. I was diagnosed in my late 20s, and that greatly affected everything leading up to that. Because it turns out that there is a history of mental illness on my mother's side. My uncle, we are pretty sure, has undiagnosed bipolar and BPD. My mother's mother, my Nana, had undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and she was diagnosed with BPD at the end of her life. And I've basically just inherited a litany of illnesses, specifically from the maternal side of my family, including feminine health issues, which is a totally different conversation that I am not ready to have yet, especially because I'm going to be having surgery in the next couple weeks to fix a pain problem. So, but living with multiple mental illnesses is so exhausting. It is so draining. It physically hurts to have to be in control of yourself 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And there are times where I will go completely silent. I will not have my phone on me. I will just, give myself a day or two to just, how can I say this appropriately? To just kind of let my body feel what it needs to feel. Let my mind, you know, just try and find peace, try and find rest. Um, I am on medications that help me sleep, because if I don't take those medications, I will be up for days on end in experiencing extreme adrenaline rushes. It sends me right into a manic episode if I even miss one day of my sleep meds. So it's hard. Thankfully I am on a really good anxiety medication. The anxiety doesn't present itself so much anymore. It does when it's like a situational type thing. Um, I cannot stand being in a small room with a lot of people. That's something that I have always struggled with. That's something that I will continue to struggle with. Um, I don't like the feeling of like there being so many people and there's no way out for me. There's no exit. I don't like the feeling of like feeling like the world is caving in on me, even if I'm just in doing a family event, like a holiday, like Christmas at my parents' house. I always have to make sure I know where the exit is, and I always have to make sure I know that there is a clear path to the exit. If I get incredibly overwhelmed, if I get incredibly overstimulated. And being overstimulated, guys, is like, for me, if I get way too overwhelmed, if I get way too overstimulated, if I get way too much, like if there's just like so much coming at me at once, that could lead into a severe panic attack for me. That can lead to me literally having my hands above my ears and just trying to block out the noise, and it usually ends up with me absolutely breaking down, crying. I don't like the feeling like I'm being smothered, and for me, overstimulation is just, it's a feeling like you have like a bag over your head or a pillow over your face, and you're just struggling to breathe. But the BPD is my worst nightmare. It's 100% my worst nightmare. I do a lot of hard work in therapy. I started doing EMDR, and that has helped me tremendously, to the point where I am now stable with my mental health, except for the daily struggles that I have dealing with the BPD. My moods are a lot more under control. I was taken off a mood stabilizer for good, or until I feel like I need it again, because of my level of stability that I've finally achieved. But it's, so many people with BPD, like, we self-sabotage. We ruin relationships. We ruin friendships because of our, the unpredictability of BPD. It's a lot. It's a lot. I still have flashbacks from, what caused my PTSD, and I still have nightmares about it. I never know when those are going to hit. It could be something small, like a smell, that triggers my PTSD, that triggers those memories, that triggers those flashbacks. And, like I said, I'm a lot more well equipped to deal with my bipolar and with the PTSD and CPTSD than I am the BPD. Because, like I said, it's 1 minute you're fine, 1 minute, 1 hour you're fine, and then not even an hour later you could be bawling your eyes out, you could be having all these negative thoughts, you can have all of these things. And when you're in a state like that, it just consumes you. Like, those feelings, they just consume you. And for me, it is such a struggle to try and get myself out of that state. And it's also very hard on my kids to watch me have to go through this. It's very hard for them to not know what mom or what version of mom they're going to get. And that's what's scary. It's one of my greatest fears, that my mental illnesses will be passed down to my kids, specifically my daughters, because mental illness is just, you literally have to adapt your life around it. There's no sugarcoating that. You have to completely readjust your life, how you live it, based off of your mental illness, and it sucks. I had to, when I got approved for disability, I had to prove my diagnoses. I had to prove all the times I've been in hospitalization programs, whether they be inpatient or outpatient, partials. I had to send in my med list. I had to be interviewed by a psychiatrist from the state. My own medical team had to send in all of my paperwork proving what I have to live with, my past suicide attempts. Like, they had to prove all of that just so that way I could get approved for disability. And I was deemed by the state, because of my mental illness, that I can't work anymore. And that kills me, seeing as how I was a licensed certified nursing assistant for the better part of a decade, and I absolutely loved what I did. And I was good at what I did. But things changed once COVID hit, and I have a video on COVID that I did previously about my experiences as a healthcare worker during the COVID-19 pandemic and how it affected my mental health. I can go into it further in a different video if you guys would like, but so living with multiple mental illnesses, like it's kind of like, one big juggling act in a lot of ways. I am very thankful that I have my bipolar under control. I'm very thankful that, for the most part, I have the PTSD side of me and the anxiety side of me under control. But living with BPD is my absolute worst nightmare. And having to constantly check myself to make sure that I'm okay, like to make sure that, like, hey, are you on the straight and narrow? Like, are you, how are you feeling? Like, I'm constantly checking in with myself mentally to make sure that I am stable, to make sure that I am doing okay. And literally, like, when you have BPD, it's like, the way that I see it is, the way that I describe it is, your mind is constantly like hamster in the wheel. It just keeps on going and going and going and going and going and going, and there's like no relief in sight. But yeah, that's a little bit of what it's like to live with multiple mental illnesses. Your life drastically changes, and you literally have to adjust your entire life, the entire way you do things, how you handle things, how you approach situations, how you approach dealing with people. You have to be on top of like that all the freaking time, and it's exhausting. Living with multiple mental illnesses is exhausting. It's beyond exhausting. And like I said, there are days where I just go completely silent, and I allow myself to feel what I need to feel. If I want to spend the entire day crying because I feel like that's what I need, then that's what I do. It's very much listening to your body. It's listening to what you feel like you need. Like, you have to be very in tune with everything about yourself. And that's the exhausting part, is checking yourself all the time to make sure that you're functioning. So, again, it is very exhausting living with multiple mental illnesses. I don't wish this upon anybody, and it has drastically changed my life, having to live with more than one mental illness. And my way of life now is way different than it was even just a few years ago, because of my mental illness. So I hope that helps, and stay tuned for another video, because I think I'm due for a makeup video sometime soon.